I never thought I'd end up here, standing in the middle of a converted warehouse in Shoreditch at 2 in the morning, my worn ballet flats barely protecting my feet from the cold concrete floor. The ad had been vague, dancer needed. 1 night only. Excellent pay. Discretion required. I should have known better. My mother always said my curiosity would get me killed, but rent in London doesn't pay itself, and the nursing home where she now lives certainly doesn't either. Miss Okafor? I turned to find a man in an expensive suit standing in the shadows. He wasn't the one who'd called me. His accent was pure East End, but refined, the kind that comes from money trying to scrub away its rough origins. Amara, I corrected, gripping my gym bag tighter. Inside were my dance clothes, my phone set to emergency dial, and pepper spray I'd bought off a dodgy website. I'm here about the position. He stepped into the light, and I understood immediately why the job paid £5,000 for 1 night. This wasn't a corporate event or a wealthy businessman's party. The man before me had danger written into every sharp angle of his face, a scar running through his left eyebrow, eyes that had seen things I couldn't imagine, and a presence that made the warehouse feel suddenly smaller. Julian Ashworth, he said, extending his hand. But everyone calls me Ash. I'd heard that name before. Whispers in the Nigerian community center in Peckham, where my aunt volunteered. Warnings from my cousin who drove a black cab through the city at night. Julian Ashworth wasn't just a businessman. He ran half of South London's underground economy. Protection rackets, gambling dens, and God knows what else. I should have walked away. Instead, I shook his hand. I need to know you can dance, he said simply. Not the kind they teach in fancy schools. Something real. Something that tells a story. The warehouse was empty except for us and 2 other men positioned near the exits, guards, obviously. A single chair sat in the center of the space, stage lights rigged above it like this had been planned meticulously. No music? I asked. You won't need it. I dropped my bag and stepped into the light, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I'd been dancing since I was 6, traditional Nigerian dance at community events, contemporary at the youth center, and eventually, when money got tight, anywhere that would pay. Dance was the language I spoke when English wasn't enough, when the weight of keeping my mother's medical bills paid and my little brother in university threatened to crush me. So I danced. I started slow, letting my body remember the Atalagwa dance my grandmother had taught me. Fast footwork, athletic movements, the kind of dance that demanded everything. Then I shifted, letting grief bleed into movement. My mother's diagnosis 3 years ago. The way dementia had stolen her piece by piece until the woman who'd raised me alone in a foreign country no longer remembered my name. I danced the story of a woman trying to hold her family together with duct tape and hope. The rage of being 26 and exhausted. The fear of failing everyone I loved. When I finally stopped, sweat dripping down my spine, the warehouse was silent. Julian Ashworth was leaning forward in his chair, elbows on his knees, watching me like I'd just performed surgery on his soul. How much do you need? He asked quietly. Excuse me? How much money do you need? Actually need, not what you think you can get away with asking for. The question caught me off guard. The ad said 5,000. I asked how much you need. I swallowed hard. £12,000. My mother's care home raised their rates. I'm 3 months behind. If I don't pay by the end of the month, they'll discharge her, and I have nowhere else to put her that won't. I stopped, hating how my voice cracked. That won't just warehouse her like furniture until she dies. He stood, pulling out his phone. You'll dance for me tonight. 1 performance. Private. And I'll give you 15,000. Why? Because I want to, he said, as if that explained everything. And because you remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who fought too hard for too long. I'm not. A prostitute? He said the word clinically. No. I have no interest in that. I want you to dance. That's all. You can leave whenever you want. But if you stay, you dance like you just did, and you take the money. Every instinct I had screamed danger. But I thought of my mother, of the care home director's sympathetic smile as she explained they simply couldn't keep her without payment. I thought of my brother, Samuel, who called me crying last week because he couldn't afford both his textbooks and his rent. Where and when? The address he gave me was in Belgravia, one of those white-column townhouses that probably cost more than I'd earn in 3 lifetimes. I arrived at 9 p.m., as instructed, wearing the same clothes I'd auditioned in, black leggings, a fitted tank top, my lucky red wrap sweater that had belonged to my grandmother. A woman answered the door. Late 50s, Nigerian like me, with the kind of beauty that age only sharpened. "You must be Amara," she said in Igbo. "I'm Adiz. I manage Mr. Ashworth's household." The relief of hearing my mother tongue nearly broke me. "You work for him?" "For 15 years, she said, switching to English as she led me inside. "He's a complicated man, but he's never laid a hand on me or anyone in this house inappropriately. Whatever you've heard about him, know that he has lines he doesn't cross." The interior was stunning, marble floors, artwork that belonged in museums, but also touches that felt personal. Photographs of places I recognized: Lagos, Accra, Kingston. Books in a dozen languages. A chess set that looked like it had been played recently. "He travels a lot," Adiz explained, catching my gaze. "Collects things from everywhere he goes. Says it reminds him that the world is bigger than London streets." She led me to a room that had been converted into a studio, proper sprung floors, mirrors along one wall, and in the center, that same chair from the warehouse. But this time, Julian wasn't alone. "Amara," he said, standing. He was wearing dark trousers and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. "Thank you for coming. This is my brother, Marcus, and my business partner, Nadia. They'll be watching as well. Is that acceptable?" I hadn't expected an audience, but I nodded. Marcus looked younger, softer around the edges, with the same sharp features but kind eyes. Nadia was striking, South Asian, probably Pakistani, with a presence that suggested she was far more than a business partner. "We'll pay you the full amount regardless," Julian continued, "but if you're uncomfortable—" "It's fine," I interrupted. "I'm a dancer. I'm used to audiences." That was a lie. I was terrified, but I was also desperate, and desperation makes cowards brave. "One question first," I said. "But why do you need someone to dance for you?" Julian exchanged glances with Marcus, and something unspoken passed between them. "My mother died 6 months ago," he said finally. "Alzheimer's. By the end, she didn't recognize any of us. But before she got sick, she used to dance. Nigerian dance, Cuban salsa, anything with rhythm. She said dance was the only honest language in the world." He paused. "You move like she did. Like you're trying to tell God something you can't put into words." The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier with shared grief. "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. "So am I." He sat down. "Dance for me tonight. Help me remember her as she was." So I did. This time, I danced differently. I started with joy, the kind my mother had shown me in old videos, before England and poverty and illness had worn her down. The bright, defiant joy of a woman who'd left everything she knew to give her children a better life. Then I shifted into loss. Slow, aching movements that captured what it felt like to watch someone disappear in real time, to have conversations that went in circles, to become a stranger to the person who gave you life. Finally, I danced remembrance. The good parts. The stories she'd told me about Nigeria, about her own mother, about the girl she'd been before the world demanded she become practical and small. When I finished, I was crying. So was Marcus. Even Nadia had tears tracking down her carefully composed face. Julian sat perfectly still, his jaw clenched, hands gripped tight on the chair arms. "Thank you," he whispered. He stood and left the room without another word. Marcus approached me, holding out a handkerchief. "He hasn't cried since the funeral," he said quietly. "You gave him permission to grieve. That's worth more than money." Adiz appeared with an envelope. 15,000 as promised. "There's also a card with Mr. Ashworth's private number. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you can call." I took the envelope with shaking hands. It felt too easy, too simple. Nothing in my life had ever been this straightforward. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Marcus. Is he dangerous? Your brother? Marcus smiled sadly. Very. But not to people like you. Julian protects things he thinks are valuable. And tonight, you became valuable to him. I didn't know how to feel about that. I paid the care home the next morning. The director looked shocked when I showed up with a banker's check, all the back payments plus 3 months in advance. I didn't explain where the money came from. I'd learned that some questions were better left unasked. For a week, I tried to forget about Julian Ashworth. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop where I worked mornings. I taught dance classes at the community center. I visited my mother, who didn't recognize me but seemed content, which was all I could ask for anymore. Then things started getting strange. First, my landlord called to say someone had paid my rent 6 months in advance. Anonymous donor, he claimed, though he'd never accepted anonymous payments before in his life. Then my brother called, confused because someone had paid off his student accommodation for the entire year. Finally, Adiz showed up at the coffee shop during my shift. Mr. Ashworth would like to see you again, she said, ordering a tea she didn't drink. Not for dancing. Just to talk. I can't, I said automatically. That night was a one-time thing. I needed the money, and he got what he paid for. We're even. He's been looking for you, she said gently. Not in a threatening way. But he can't stop thinking about you, about what you did for him. Julian isn't good with emotions, Amar. He processes things through actions. The rent, your brother's accommodation, that's him trying to say thank you in the only language he knows. I didn't ask for any of that. I know. That's probably why he did it. She stood, leaving her untouched tea and a business card. The choice is yours. But he's not what you think. Give him a chance to prove it. I threw the card away. Then I dug it out of the trash 3 hours later. I avoided Julian Ashworth for 3 weeks. Every time I saw a black car idling too long on my street, every time someone looked at me twice on the tube, I wondered if he'd sent them. But nothing happened. No more mysterious payments. No more visits from Adiz. Just silence. That silence felt worse than any threat. My mother had a bad day, the kind where she screamed at nurses and tried to escape, convinced she was late for a job she hadn't worked in 20 years. I sat with her for 6 hours, holding her hand while she cried for her own mother, dead 30 years now. When I left the care home, exhausted and hollowed out, Julian was waiting in the parking lot. Don't, I said immediately. Whatever this is, I'm not interested. I know. He was leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, looking nothing like a crime boss and everything like a man who'd also had a terrible day. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. How did you know I was here? Adiz mentioned which home your mother is in. I've been coming here once a week to see mine. I stared at him. Your mother's here? Room 3B. Alzheimer's ward, same as yours. I moved her here after she died because I couldn't bear to go to the other place anymore. Some of her things are still in the room. He looked up at the building. I sit with other people's mothers sometimes. The ones who don't get visitors. I tell them stories. It helps. The image of Julian Ashworth, notorious crime lord, sitting with abandoned dementia patients, rearranged something in my chest. Why are you telling me this? Because you think I'm a monster, he said simply. And I am in a lot of ways. I've hurt people. I've done things I can't take back. But I'm also someone who understands what it's like to watch the person who made you disappear piece by piece. And I think maybe you need someone who understands that. I don't need anything from you. Then why did you keep my card? I didn't have an answer for that. He pushed off from the car. I have dinner every Sunday at my house. Just me, Marcus, Nadia, and Adiz. Home cooking, bad jokes, and no business talk. You're welcome to join us. Anytime. No expectations, no obligations. Just food and company. I don't understand why you care. Because you danced like you were dancing for your life, he said. And I know that feeling. I've lived that feeling. And nobody should have to do it alone. He left before I could respond, his car disappearing into London traffic. I showed up the following Sunday with a bottle of wine I couldn't afford and enough anxiety to power the national grid. Marcus answered the door, grinning. You came. Julian's been pacing for an hour. It's hilarious. The house smelled incredible, jollof rice, plantains, suya, and something else I couldn't identify. Adiz was cooking while Nadia set the table and Julian chopped vegetables with the precision of someone who'd learned knife work in contexts I didn't want to think about. Amara, he said, looking up. His smile was hesitant, almost shy. It transformed his face completely. I'm glad you came. Dinner was chaotic and warm. Marcus told stories about Julian as a kid, how he'd tried to start a protection racket at their comprehensive school at age 12, extorting bullies instead of victims. Nadia revealed she'd met Julian when she tried to rob him at gunpoint, and he'd been so impressed he'd offered her a job instead. I was 19 and stupid, she laughed, desperate to get my family out of a bad situation. Julian gave me the money, told me to go legitimate, and called me every week for 6 months to make sure I did. You were smart and brave, Julian corrected, just pointed in the wrong direction. Adiz told me how Julian had found her working 3 jobs to pay for her daughter's university and simply paid the tuition himself. He does this, she said, gesturing around the table. Collects strays. Makes a family out of people who need one. I felt seen in a way that was both comforting and terrifying. After dinner, Julian found me on the terrace, looking out over the garden. Your family, I said. They love you. They tolerate me, he corrected, but he was smiling. I don't make it easy. Why me? I asked finally. Out of everyone in London, why did you notice me? He was quiet for a long time. My mother used to say that some people carry their souls on the outside. That you could see exactly who they were if you watched how they moved through the world. You dance like that. Like you're showing everyone exactly who you are, consequences be damned. He turned to look at me. I've spent my whole life hiding who I am. I saw you that night, and I thought, I wanted to know what it felt like to be that brave. I'm not brave, I whispered. I'm barely holding on. That's what brave is, he said. Holding on when everything tells you to let go. We stood there in the London night, 2 people shaped by loss and desperation, and something shifted between us. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. The understanding that we were both fighting the same battle from different sides. Come to dinner next week, he said. And the week after. Keep coming until you don't feel like you're drowning anymore. And if I never stop feeling that way, then I'll teach you to swim. 3 months later, I was teaching dance at a youth center in Brixton when Julian walked in. You found me, I said, not surprised. He'd been keeping his distance, respecting my space while making sure I knew he was there if I needed him. Your brother told me where you'd be, he admitted. I wanted to ask you something. The kids were watching curiously. Julian in his expensive suit, clearly out of place among the worn mats and graffitied walls. There's a charity event next month, he said. For Alzheimer's research. Marcus organized it, mostly legitimate business people, some politicians. We need a performance. I thought, if you'd be willing, you could choreograph something. Use some of the kids from here. Show people what arts funding actually does. I stared at him. You want me to choreograph a charity event? I want you to do what you do best, he corrected. Tell a story that matters. Change how people see something. You did it for me. Maybe you can do it for them. The kids were already buzzing with excitement. I could see it in their faces, the same hunger I'd had at their age, for someone to believe their stories mattered. All right, I said. But I'm in charge. Completely. No interference. Wouldn't dream of it. The next month was chaos. I worked with 12 kids, ranging from 8 to 17, all from different backgrounds, all carrying their own grief and hope. We created a piece about memory, what it means to lose it, what it means to hold on to it, what it means to honor the people we're losing. Julian came to every rehearsal. He never interfered, but he watched from the back of the room, and sometimes I'd catch him wiping his eyes. The night of the performance, I was terrified. The venue was in Mayfair, filled with people who'd never set foot in Brixton, who saw kids like mine as statistics rather than humans. But when the music started and the kids began to move, the room went silent. They danced their stories. A boy whose grandmother raised him, now in a care home. A girl whose father couldn't remember her name anymore. Twins whose mother had early onset dementia at 42. They danced loss and love and the terrible beauty of holding on. When it ended, the applause was thunderous. More importantly, people were crying, writing checks, promising funding. Julian found me backstage and without a word, pulled me into his arms. "Thank you," he whispered into my hair. "Thank you for showing them." I held on to him, this dangerous man who'd become my friend, my anchor, my mirror. "Thank you for seeing me," I whispered back. 6 months later. My mother died on a Tuesday. Julian was with me when it happened. He'd been visiting her regularly, reading to her, sitting with her when I couldn't be there, telling her stories about Nigeria that she seemed to hear even when she couldn't respond. When she finally slipped away, peaceful in her sleep, he held my hand and didn't try to fill the silence with empty platitudes. The funeral was small. My brother flew in from university. My aunts came from Peckham. And Julian's family, because that's what they'd become, filled the rest of the church. At the wake, Adiz pulled me aside. "He loves you," she said simply. "In case you haven't noticed." "I know," I said. And I did. Somewhere between the Sunday dinners and the late-night conversations and the way he looked at me like I was something precious and fierce, I'd fallen in love with him too. That night, in his garden under the London stars, I danced one more time. I danced for my mother. For the woman she'd been before illness stole her. For the courage she'd shown crossing an ocean alone. For the love she'd given me that made me who I was. Julian watched from his chair, tears streaming down his face, and when I finished, he stood and pulled me close. "Dance with me," he whispered. "I don't know how to dance with someone else," I admitted. "I've always danced alone." "Then let me learn your rhythm," he said. "And you can learn mine. We'll make something new." So we did. We swayed there in the darkness, two broken people learning how to move together, how to hold each other up, how to make beauty out of grief. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was finally learning to swim. A year later, the youth center in Brixton got a massive anonymous donation. Enough to renovate the building, hire full-time instructors, and provide scholarships for kids who couldn't afford classes. I became the director. Julian became my unlikely partner, using his connections to fund arts programs across South London. We never married. I didn't need a ring to know I belonged with him. But we built something better than a fairy tale. We built a life based on mutual understanding, on shared grief transformed into purpose, on the recognition that sometimes the most unlikely people become your home. My brother graduated with honors. I visit my mother's grave every Sunday, and Julian comes with me. We tell her about the kids we've helped, the programs we've started, the way we're turning pain into something beautiful. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and London sleeps outside, I dance for him. Not because he commands it, not because he pays for it, but because he sees me, truly sees me, and loves every complicated, grieving, resilient part of who I am. Some love stories start with roses and romance. Ours started with a dance, a desperate need, and two people brave enough to be broken together. And that, I've learned, is enough.